This is the All-Star Networking Show with your host, Cathy Paper.
Welcome, Katie Stearns, to the All-Star Networking Show. I'm so happy to have you here with me today on this snowy day in Minnesota. I would love for you to just introduce yourselves to our listeners and say a little hello.
Thank you, Cathy. I'm so pleased to be here, and it's great what you're doing. So thank you. We need this.
Oh, nice. Well, we all need relationships. Yes. We need connections. And you and I go way back to when our kids were little, before you had even started one of your first businesses. And now you've done so many amazing things. And I want to talk about kind of networking and where you're at. And it was great to reconnect, at the latest events that we were around town. And, maybe just for a second, I still remember when you did the You Betcha box. For people that haven't Googled you yet, tell a little bit to me just how that business came about. And I got that cool hat, and that was just early on when I was starting my crazy videos and, kind of talking out loud to everyone. So
yeah. And you were a big thank you. Your helping me promote that was a big part of the success of that company. So thank you. I am a serial entrepreneur. So I actually had some other businesses before You Betcha Box you probably didn't even know about. So when my kids were young, I started the very first Minnesota home staging, real estate staging company. There was no other staging company in the state at the time. And I grew that and I built that around my kids' lives. I wanted to work. I love starting new things, launching new concepts, etc. And thought this was something I could do on my own schedule. And I did. It did really well until the real estate market crashed, and then everything just died on the vine. So a few years later, then I kind of plugged into some work with this, doing educational advocacy work with the school district for quite a few years. And as part of that, I started thinking about different ways to help support families who couldn't, the schools were removing a lot of the, enrichment stuff for kids. And I was feeling like, how do we create equity with this when people can't just afford to write checks to send their kids to camps and all this stuff? So I wanted to, and I had this idea of a way that people could sell something of value, because I didn't like the fundraisers we were offered in some of these things. I thought maybe there's a better, fundraiser it's more community supportive as well, and not just junk, right? So something people were excited to be part of. So that's kind of how the idea hatched for You Betcha Box.
Oh, really? So instead of gift wrapping, you didn't want to sell gift wrapping or popcorn anymore. You said, I'm going to do the You Betcha Box. Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I thought, it was specifically with the Minnesota Boy Choir. So I'm like, we're a Minnesota organization. Why don't we sell a box full of Minnesota products? And then we could cross promote the concerts in there and maybe put a CD in there. That's kind of where it started. But then as I got into it, I realized, wow, this is actually super challenging because it's food, and now I have to be licensed, and then, on and on. So anyway, I also, after that first pilot year, realized that this is way bigger than just, a fundraising. In fact, it's not a great youth fundraiser, because the moms just do all the selling. And and secondly, really it's a ideal corporate or personal gift, right? And so I decided, okay, this is real. This is a great idea, and I'm going to move forward with it. So, and it really was interesting because it allowed me to really, I was within that box. I was selling local artisan food as we're in the box, and then we'd have different themes, right? So I got to know all these small local entrepreneurs that were making these wonderful artisan food products that were wonderful and exciting. And as I met them and learned about them, I started hearing their stories. And that's when I really realized this is not even about the food, it's about their story. The stories of all these inspiring entrepreneurs right in our own local neighborhood. We don't even know about them, and then I realized, okay, that's what I'm selling, not,
Yes.
So anyway, and I learned over time. And so I had to really I was unknown because I was not a food maker, but I kind of said, look, I'm just like you guys, except for that your products are my raw ingredients. I'm making something new out of your products. but I had to break into that network, which is a very small, very tight community. They know each other, et cetera. And it was it was quite a fun, but also somewhat challenging because, as small business people, they're very, this is their baby, and they're very cautious about relationships and about engagement with, especially somebody like me. I'm not coming in with any support. Like, I'm not Kowalski's coming to them. I'm just this independent person. And are they going to trust their brand with me? Are they going to trust me to help them grow their business through You Betcha Box, which is how we help the small makers. They got exposure through our box. And then on the other side, I had to network into the, who are the people who might like to purchase this from us in quantity? Of course, all my friends were wonderful and bought it for their own personal things, but how do I break into a corporate thing when I'm not coming from that world? I had done home-based businesses, forever. I left the paid workforce when my middle son was born. So I was now doing all self-employment, either consulting type things, and I didn't have a professional network at all. I didn't come from corporate. I didn't come from
Right.
So I had to figure out, how do I break into both of these communities, and how do I grow these relationships, et cetera, so.
Well, which is why I'm going to just pause right there with your story, because you've used the word network and sort of in a couple of contexts, that like tight-knit networks or smaller networks, or didn't have a network in this area, but had to grow in a different one. And, again, I think you're an amazing networker. It may be hard to see that piece of it, because you were the small business owner right in the middle of it all. And at least for me, when I network, sometimes I'm like, hey, can't we move a little faster? Like, how do we get this done? Or just even when you say something's a small, tight-knit network, I call those, sometimes they're closed networks. They don't want to let anybody in. And you're like, why? Is there something wrong with me? Why are you not letting me into your network? And I don't know if that was your experience or not, but it's just, again, you've used the word network a couple times about building business. That I guess I want to start with when you started your first business, Katie, and said you didn't have the professional network. How did you, if you think back a little bit, how did you go about building that? For somebody else that's listening, that's thinking, hey, I'm home with my kids, or I'm starting this new thing, or I'm not from this country, or I'm not from this state. Like, how did you start that journey? Because again, I think you're a fearless connector.
That's so funny. I'm not fearless, that's for sure. I've just learned how to plow ahead anyway.
Well, and honestly know that maybe that's the secret, because people always ask me too, Katie, when I say I'm nervous when I walk that room you and I were in the other night at the Huntington Bank Stadium. I was nervous too. I didn't know a soul. I blabbed the whole time to the girls in the elevator, to get my nerves out. And people are always surprised. They're like, Paper, you do this for a living. So I think it's funny. You don't realize you come across as fearless.
Oh, that is so funny. It's hard because I am a fifth generation Minnesotan. So I don't have, let me think of a time when I didn't know anybody. Just, I guess when I went to college out in San Diego, I was completely flying solo out there. But anyway, in terms of professionally, I think that, we're all kind of pretty, I don't know. I mean, internationally, it's harder, but there's always connectors, right? And I think it's getting to know people on a personal level. You got to start there, and then, it's reciprocal, because maybe there's things you can help with them with as well, right? And then you start to tell people what you're working on or what you're hoping for. And often it's kind of during an exploratory phase. I mean, I think you want to enter into these types of things in a very open-minded, exploratory mindset where you're not even 100% sure yet what direction your idea is going to take. And you shouldn't be, by the way. I mean, I just think if you're too locked in, you're going to you're going to have blinders on and you will miss opportunities. And sometimes I've seen people go headlong into something that they should have pivoted from early and been you got to be open-minded and listen actively, like ask people more. And it may not sink in for a while. Like happens to me all the time where I'll talk to somebody and a little seed will be planted. I won't even realize that that's happened. And then the next day I'll wake up with like 10 new ideas that just come to me overnight. And it starts to take shape, and it starts to get, and then as it takes shape, and I look at it too, kind of like a tree, where you take, you have the first few people and then they lead you to other people and you get to know them and you talk to them. And a lot of it is throwing darts to, and you're hoping to hit something, it's not necessarily a linear process at all. I find it to be very more organic. And sometimes I found over the years that I've done all these different entrepreneurial things that I'll meet somebody way down the road that I'm like, God, I wish I had met you. I wish I met you 3 years ago. It's like, oh my gosh, you have the answer for this,
So I want to ask a question about you said you get to know people on a personal level. How do you do that? Like, how do you, do you have certain questions or does that just come naturally for you?
Well, we're Minnesotans, so of course we talk about the weather for usually half the meeting.
Oh, really?
Well, you got to talk about the weather.
No wonder people don't think I'm a Minnesotan because literally I'm like, they're like, are you going to cancel playing tennis today because of the snow? And I was like, are you nuts? Like, no way. I don't want, we got other things to do.
Oh, that's okay,
so you talk about the weather, but
and like, what are you going to do outside today? And then that leads to other things, about like, oh, do you ski? Do you bike? Like we just did before this call, we talked about skiing. It's like you find common interests and I love humor too. If there's, I think that's always disarming. And it's not like you do it, it's not staged. You're just naturally friendly.
Okay. That's why I asked though, Katie, because you really do have a genuine connection style. And I know sometimes when I walk into, let's say, a new hairdresser and they say, oh, that's such a cute top. I sort of want to say, one, you don't really know me. Two, I think this thing's not that great. Like I'm always a little like, did they read it in a manual? Like lead with a compliment or, again, maybe I'm just suspicious, but I think you have a natural way of talking about the personal piece, and we do want to get to know people. And again, to your next point is when you're networking, you're seeing where it goes exploratory, and then it leads to other people. How does it lead to other people? Like maybe explain if there's a relationship where it did lead to an introduction. Like I know even, Katie Harms, who has another podcast I'll plug because it's really good, of you in our mirror, or in your mirror, is how does your networking lead to other people? Once you made that personal connection, you've chatted a little bit, do you have a story or how do you do that?
Gosh, I've never really stepped back to think about it. But part of it, I think, is kind of like if you can engage in almost like a collaborative brainstorm, like, create, because I think people love that. Most people do. They love to be engaged on a creative level. And they don't often get, especially in most people's jobs. I mean, they don't really get an opportunity to really express their creativity very much. Even creative people, like people who have creative professions, but those who are being paid to be creative, they really love it.
Yes.
Engage with me creatively, please, but to have them, to kind of set up a collaborative creative brainstorming session with them. Like, here's what do you think? And then kind of feed off of each other with that. And ask questions about that. What do you think? Do you think I should approach it this way? Do you have any contacts in that area that you think I should talk to next? I mean, when I was really early in my career, like right out of college, I attended, I think it was through a woman venture workshop I did about career life planning. They talked about how to do informational interviews and how to do, like at the end, you should ask them for a few names of people that they think I should talk to next that could, maybe answer some new questions. And then ask for that contact and ask if they would be willing to do a warm introduction, ideally. And it's interesting because some people are reticent to do that. They'll just give you a name and want you to reach out. And I don't know if that's a Minnesota cultural thing or I have heard, and I don't know if this is true because I've only been here, that we tend to be more reserved about sharing our networks here than in other places.
Sorry. Oh, I was just going to interrupt you because I have a few thoughts on that of what you just said of asking for the connection or asking for a warm introduction. It's the most important part of the networking and building relationships, but I don't think everybody does it because they don't want to be told no or have it go into the like, well, nobody responds back. And the fact that you're asking for it, I don't know if it's a Minnesota thing. I think sometimes people, they don't know enough. Like if you ask them for a connection, hey, will you introduce me to so-and-so in your network? They don't have enough information to feel comfortable and they don't know how to ask, can you tell me a little bit more? And I think you're very natural at doing that. So I don't know if it's Minnesotan. I just think sometimes Minnesotans, rather than saying, hey, I don't know enough about your business to refer you, or I find myself, I get asked a lot by people, will you introduce me to so-and-so? And my line is, I will say, can you tell me a little bit more about what it is you do and why you want me to connect you to that person? Because, and then I'll say this, I don't know them that well.
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of people in my network that I just sort of know, but do I know them well enough to give them to somebody that I've just met? Usually I need just a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the other thing, because I haven't been in, like sometimes I have stepped in it because I don't know what the etiquette norms are around that. And like, for example, I didn't realize until recently that I shouldn't just reach out to a friend with an introduction. I should ask them first. Like somebody said, some people are so sensitive to that and I'm not. So I'm like, absolutely open book. If you got somebody you think I should meet, send them my way. And then I have the power to say, I don't have much time. I can say no. So that's how but other people aren't like that. And they want to be asked before you introduce them to someone.
Well, think about it this way. I mean, because I don't know if you stepped in it or if it's an etiquette or it's what you're doing is, again, and I think this is like the advanced networking. If I'm inviting you over for dinner, right, and I'm setting my table, and I got 6 people around my table and I've cooked and whatever. This is all, of course, fictional, right? Because I don't entertain a lot. But if I were, and you walked up to my door with somebody that you thought was the greatest, and came in and sat down at the table, I might go, whoa, 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 hold on. And I think some people are uncomfortable in that little moment. I, of course, again, my mom was an amazing entertainer. I would be like, oh, I'm so glad you brought your friend. Hold on one second. I would probably, sweat a little underneath. But I think what you're describing is such a good thing to kind of get to know your network of how do they want to meet new people. Because most people do want to meet new people. They just don't ever want to be caught off guard. Because honestly, best lesson I had, Katie, and I'm sounding a little over caffeinated because I'm doing all the talking, but I gave a person looking for a job to 2 people in my network without thinking about how this person would show up. And thankfully, the 2 people called me and said, hey, not only did this person show up unprepared, they spent an hour with me. They never said thank you. like they were a terrible guest, right? And those two people called me up. That's how I learned my lesson, because they called me up and said, Paper, hey, I thought you would want to know, this person you gave me showed up like this. And I was like, what? They did? I never thought that that person would show up like that. And so then it gave me a chance to go back to my friend that was, looking for a job and say, hey, let me give you a couple tips. People will meet with you, but don't ask for an hour. Don't be late. Be prepared. And then I would say things like, I'll set the table for you, right? I'll set the table for you, and then I need you to let me know how it went. So those are my little learnings.
Yes, that makes total sense. And by the way, kudos to you for coming back to the person and giving that feedback, because
right.
that's awesome that you did that. And I don't know why people, we all make mistakes,
right.
We all need to learn. And I hope that person received that, with grace and gratitude, because
they did. And I didn't tell them, I kind of wanted, because honestly, when I first heard it, of course, my first reaction is I was mad. I'm like, how dare you? You're ruining my reputation, like blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, this is not about me. This is about my friend looking for a job. And we had a nice conversation and they sort of got it. And I realized, you're right, there is kind of an etiquette, or there's finding out. I have people that I could fling people to them all day long without any introduction. They'd be happy. I have other people that, like, I got to give them their bio, their LinkedIn profile, their locker combination, the whole deal, because and I only can give them like one, versus you and me, maybe we're a little more open with our connections because we've learned how to do it.
Yeah, that's really, really a good insight. But, I think also, there's this whole thing I've observed around women knowing how to step up for each other, and learning how to do that by being not so afraid to actually go it's one, I think we're really good at cheerleading. We've been taught how to cheerlead. I talk about this a lot, like, oh, you go girl, but oh, you got this. You should go apply for that job in my company that I work for, by the way, instead of speaking to the hiring manager directly on behalf of your friend.
Yeah.
And saying, this person, you should talk to them. They're amazing. And I think that, there's a lot underneath this, right? About for us as women.
Yeah.
And I have met some women who are incredible. Who are just amazing connectors and absolutely step up for other women like you. But I have unfortunately also seen too many times the other, where it's like, somebody's trying to get into this place, they'd be perfect for it. The other person even acknowledges it, but they're unwilling to really step up for them. And I think what you talk about with the reputational thing and the fear that somehow if they're not perfect, it's that perfectionism maybe that we suffer from. Like, if they're not perfect, it's going to reflect on me, and I'm struggling so hard to appear perfect all the time. Maybe, I don't know. Who knows? I'm not a psychologist, but that's a theory. So that was something that I think, what you're doing is really valuable, because I think we need to learn this. And it's like, why do we need, yes, we want to network for our own success in everything we do in life, and our social, even if you're not working, you want to have a healthy social life,
right?
And a community. But also, I think as women, there's a special thing here for us to learn. And that's how we can start to achieve, greater strides in equality.
But I think, you said, is it because we're not from, we're not Minnesotans, even though we are? Is it the Minnesota culture? I think it's just people in general. And I think my 2 cents are, I do think women and men network a little differently, but I think deep down, we all want people to succeed, but sometimes we don't want them to be better than us. And whether we're withholding of our network, or we don't have time, or you're just not used to it. Again, if I took my dinner party analogy, sometimes you don't want to answer the door, right? And let people in. I would love to see more women refer business to each other, to when asked, I think a bigger thing in networking, and maybe you've experienced this, I think as women, oftentimes we don't ask for what we want from other women. We build friendships and relationships. But there's a post that I love on LinkedIn from the CEO of Rent the Runway, who said that she had more conversations with people about her family than she did when she took her company public. That she was like, why is this happening? And
Yes.
I mean, it's probably why I ask you about when you get to
Yeah.
know somebody personally. Like, I love knowing the personal part of people. I love people, right? But I also want to do business.
Yes.
And
Totally.
for her to validate that for me made me feel good of like, okay, so it's not just me. Sometimes I'm like, and then I get self-conscious. I don't know how to ask, or I don't know them well enough. Again, I'm over caffeinated. I'm babbling. So
No, that is so 100% true. And like right now, so I sold you BetchaBox, and now I'm starting this whole new tech startup that's audacious. I mean, it's freaking audacious. I'm creating a whole new like AirPod like earring.
yeah.
So to do something like this and going up again, the vision for this is huge, right? It's a huge opportunity. It's a huge space. It's a you know, and so like it's when I talk about like how big this is with other women, I can see that, like what you're talking about, like I don't know what it is, but there's kind of like what are you doing? This is dangerous, or whatever it is, or that's too big, or maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just projecting. Maybe that's my own
No, but
sense of,
maybe you're fearless. So let's get with this new venture is let's talk a little bit about how do you set yourself up for success with this new venture that you're doing? Like, are you sitting down and thinking about who you need to meet, or let's talk through a little bit
okay.
how because you're not audacious, you're clear. And I have one person actually who I want to connect you with
Okay.
after we talk a little bit, but maybe say a little more and tell me, how are you thinking about building some relationships with this
Yeah.
tech startup?
Okay, so the interesting thing about this versus everything I've done before, in the past, I was able to bootstrap my businesses, meaning I was able to grow them out of my own, like some were service-based, so they didn't have a big capital requirement. Some, like You Betcha Box, always needed capital, but somehow I managed to figure it out and grow it out of revenue with no financial input. So this is different. This is a, very sophisticated engineered product that requires capital. And so now I'm having to understand, how do you raise money? Because I've never done that before, and brought resources in for that. And then how do I tap into those networks? I'm not in those circles at all. And, is it even in Minnesota that they would even, that there's angel investors and VCs that would be willing to invest in this type of a business? Because I'm learning they're quite specific. And I most likely the funding would be coming from out of state. And the other interesting or difficult thing about it is that it's a female focused product, and I'm a woman founder, and only 2% of venture capital goes to women. And the other thing is very little of that would go to a female focused product. So I'm kind of, got a major mountain in front of me. And how do I find that? In some ways, I'm approaching it kind of like, okay, I have to find, so my first customer base I need to tap into are investors. That's who I'm selling to right now, are investors, not end users, right? That'll come after we get the money. And so trying to figure out like who would be interested in this, who cares about this, and how do I tap, what are the different pockets of people, where are they even? And,
But
and so I'm trying to figure that out.
Didn't you went to CES? Because I know I follow you on Instagram, and
Yes.
you went to CES to try to find that. And for people listening that don't know, Consumer Electronics Show, I worked at Best Buy years ago, so I love that everybody goes to CES. So you went there to find investors or to do market research?
All of the above. So the idea is that we'll have a booth there when we have our big reveal, our big public coming out will be at CES. And so I wanted to learn the show. Where would it be? See how it works. And also potentially meet investors, meet other potential partners. So like I got to meet the CEO and the lead team just by accident of Indiegogo, which is a crowdfunding platform.
Yeah.
And they were all excited about it, so that's, and that was really empowering. Then I met some other people there who were investors and they were interested. So we had some follow-up meetings. And then, I just attended events and just got a feel for the whole ecosystem for what we're doing. That was good. And it was very helpful to do all that and see it.
Okay, which is why like Gold Star, All Star, again, anybody listening, I know is furiously taking notes because what you just said of figuring out the ecosystem, Katie, that's the like smart networking, smart startup mindset. That's what has made you successful repeatedly because not everybody thinks like that. And you have both a short-term and a longer-term vision that you're going to have a booth there and it's putting yourself in the right places with that. So again, I'm just giving a star. Again, I know whoever's listening is taking big notes because what you said is finding investors who care, finding people who have done it. The statistics are daunting, but again, I'll write down for you the name, but let's look at, I'm a huge Legally Blonde fan, right? Love Reese Witherspoon, follow her, love the movie. I could make some quotes there. What was the one my favorite is, getting into Harvard. Is that hard? Is that hard to get into Harvard?
I know.
Right?
Well, that's what I mean by audacious. Like you just have to assume, hey, somebody's got to do it. Why not be me?
So let me connect the dots for you to your point of the venture capital, and somebody you should look at is it's called C9 and it's a female venture group out of San Francisco that I just talked to my brother about because he follows this woman that somehow I found out Kim Griffin is her name. And I said, Tom, to my brother, Tom, Stanford MBA. I said, Tom, why do you follow her? She's friends with Reese Witherspoon. She's a female venture group. Like, do you know her? Because he went to business school in the Bay Area. And sure enough, he knows her because he had went to business school with her husband, and she's a female venture funder that you got to track down on Instagram. So I'm an amazing Instagram investigator, and all roads lead to like Reese Witherspoon or Kevin Bacon, or now the younger generation.
Well,
but we're going to look at her.
This is on my pitch deck as one of the targeted influence. I mean, if we had just one of those people, like I've pitched to Serena Ventures. So Serena Williams, can you imagine? It's over. I mean, we're in.
Yeah.
If any of these people are interested or even just give us a shout out, we are, boom, it'll blow up.
Yep.
So that would be amazing.
Perfect. And then I know too another woman, Jill Johnson, who used to be in the, she designed my wedding rings for me, and she used to be in the jewelry business, but she did something with a bug spray earring. And so Jill would be a super connection with you, but I digress, and we're running out of time. We're running out of time here. So let's leave our listeners. We'll have to, we're going to do this again, but let's leave our listeners with kind of one tip. Again, you're a great networker. It's just, it's hard work and sometimes it's confusing. But you're a great connector. Is what's one tip you would give people, and maybe give them the tip of on the days when people are bugging you or they're not moving fast enough, like what do you do? What do you say to yourself? How do you right that ship to build more relationships?
I don't know if I'm doing it the right way or not, but when I have disappointment, I just find that I have a little pity party for about a day or so. And then suck it up, buttercup, get back in there. I mean, it's kind of a, let me think about that. So like at that event.
But to me, Katie, that's enough. I think that's we can punctuate it right there. Right. I have a pity party, suck it up, buttercup, and get back in there, because I can tell you too, I've built a lot of relationships that sometimes they don't go anywhere or whatever. And I go into a different room or call another person or take a look at like, am I doing this wrong? And am I doing it right? Or why are we not gelling? Because when it works. That I think we should end on that. And you can think You can think about it for the next time, because you know what? By the next time, I know you're going to have found your funding. You're going to have a different problem to solve and new people to find. And I'll be like, oh, girl, you got this.
Awesome. Yay. Well,
Yeah.
this is a great pick-me-up.
Yeah.
I needed that. I needed this. Thank you, Cathy.
Well, you're awesome. So thank you for being a guest on the All-Star Networking Show. And
Of course. Thank you.
I'm going to put the link in the show notes so people can find you on LinkedIn. Anybody listening that is dialed into, whether it's jewelry or connecting with you or startup, AirPod-like earring. I love it. I don't know. I think you're going to be the next Fitbit, and I haven't even seen your deck.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Cathy. This has been a blast. Thanks again for what you're doing. It's really important.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for listening to the All-Star Networking Show with Cathy Paper. If you're interested in being a guest, please contact Cathy at www.rockpaperstar.com.